We're going to show you some of the troubleshooting steps that you want to follow if you have an E-SM, where as soon as you get on it and you go into like a quick start program, all of a sudden you'll notice that as you're walking, the display will either pause. In some cases it jumps into a pause and then it resets and the whole display comes right back on. There's a few simple steps you want to do, and then we'll cover some other more technical steps. The first thing we want to do is initialize the display software. In order to do that, we're going to enter the maintenance mode by pressing 0, 2, and OK, and then immediately when it says maintenance on there, you're going to press 147 at the same time. That lets you know that you initialized it properly. Once it's done initializing, you want to go into the maintenance mode. Actually, let it reset, then go into the maintenance mode. And you want to check all the settings and make sure they're set correctly. The main thing you want to look at is make sure it's set to the proper model. And we're set to STEPMILL, so we're alright. Once you've done the initialization and you verified that it's set to the proper model, you want to go ahead and do the test and see if it continues to reset or pause. Once you've initialized the display software and you continue to have it to where it pauses, the next thing we want to check is the gap on the RPM sensor of the alternator. So you want to remove the left side shroud in order to find the RPM sensor on the alternator. If you look, I'm going down in here and I'm looking right over here, and there is my alternator and there is my RPM sensor. I want to check the gap on this one. It should be about a credit card difference. I think that might be like 1.5 millimeters. Somewhere around there. Looking at this one, it definitely, I could tell that it's a little bit too big. The other thing you want to check is the alignment. Sometimes this can turn, and so the RPM sensor will be cocked to kind of one side and not exactly pointing at the little RPM disc, this right here. So on this one we definitely need to make an adjustment. In order to make an adjustment, you want to loosen the bolt right here. Loosen enough to where you can see that the sensor is moving. Now this can be a little bit tricky when you're trying to put it on there, because as you go to tighten that bolt, a lot of times that RPM sensor will shift, and as you can see right here, if it shifts, it may as you're tightening it, it tends to do one of these. And so the best technique we can recommend is if you have like a old credit card, or like in the case of what we have here, we have a like a old hotel key, and you want to slide it up in there, and then you want to push the RPM sensor up and to where it's holding the credit card or whatever you have in there. As it's holding it in there, then you want to come in here and tighten it down. Okay. Now that we got it tightened, and you can see we still have the credit card or our room key here, then we just pull it out and check our gap, and it'll hold. The other thing that you want to do before you take off is you want to rotate this around completely and make sure that it's not hitting. And this is pretty good. You can see the difference in the gap here. It's a much tighter gap, and that is what we want. Once we've tightened up the gap like we have here, the next thing we want to do is test it out and see if it continues to pause. In most cases, the issue will be resolved by either initializing the display or adjusting the RPM sensor gap. If for some reason you're still getting it to do that pause, it could be that your pause button here on the warm bar doesn't have a really good connection, and it's kind of simulating somebody hitting the pause. So we're going to go ahead and check the connection here at the display electronics for the pause. What I did to get the display open is I removed all the screws on the back here. If you look down here, you'll see right here is your this cable right here is for your pause, and we want to make sure that it's plugged into this little daughter board on the side nice and tight. I recommend disconnecting so So you can see here I have it totally disconnected. A lot of times you might just look at it and you think, oh, it's plugged in, but it actually might not be. So by disconnecting and then reconnecting, and make sure it's in there nice and firm. In this case, we got a good connection, and that should take care of the pausing.